Interior defensive lineman and a Ben Johnson discussion on a Tuesday. Locked on Lions.
You are Locked On Lions, your daily Detroit Lions podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, everybody, on the Tuesday edition of Locked On Lions, Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Matt Dery with you. What's happening, everybody? Hope you're doing well on a Tuesday, February 11th and a Wednesday, February 12th. Thank you for making us your first listen, checking us out wherever you get your podcasts. You everydayers out there that watch or listen to the pod daily, appreciate all of you. That includes some of our buddies checking in on the old LinkedIn. Matt Hawkins. Matt is the pride of Grove City, Ohio. There you go. Matt Hawkins, appreciate you. Eric French as well. Thank you for checking us out right here on Locked On Lions daily as well. We always appreciate all of you that watch or listen to the podcast. Our very good friend Lorin Cox from Locked On Bears is going to join us momentarily to talk about the Ben Johnson experience that has taken place in Chicago. It's so funny. I run into Lions fans. I don't care if I'm at a bar, restaurant. I don't know if I'm at the store. I don't care where I'm at. A Troy Chamber event. People coming up to, oh, Ben Johnson's a traitor. I hate Ben Johnson. This Lions-Bears rivalry has always been interesting. You know I always tool on the Bears. But, geez, can we go easy on our buddy Ben here? Like, you don't blame him for he's the reason we lost to the Commanders. He was already 1 foot out the door. It's like, oh my God. The defense gave up 45 points. The whole team sucked. But sure, blame Ben Johnson, hate Ben Johnson. Go for it. Whatever. But we'll talk about Ben Johnson's transition to Chicago. Coming up with Lorin Cox from Locked On Bears today. Or as I like to say in the Jeff Joniak voice, when I used to be at Detroit Sports 105.1, we used to play the magical drop, touchdown Bears. Used to love the Joniak call. Jeff Joniak is a great play-by-play man. So there's that. So we'll talk to Lorin about that. I mentioned yesterday on the program, we discussed how the Lions can emulate the Philadelphia Eagles now that the Eagles are Super Bowl champions. One other quick shout out. My boy Ross Tucker Football Podcast, CBS Sports. Ross has become a friend. We love having Ross on the show. How about Ross was down at Radio Row all last week doing his podcast, doing his hits, flew back like Friday night to Philly, picked up his family, and on Saturday flew back to New Orleans to take his family, who lives in Pennsylvania, his wife and 2 daughters, to the Super Bowl because they are Eagles fans. Ross is a super dad. We love you, Ross. That's awesome stuff. Love that. Happy birthday, by the way, on Sunday to friend of the podcast as well, the great Ian Eagle, who was on the call for the international feed of Sunday's Super Bowl as well. We'll get Ian on at some point here soon, too, to talk a little bit of Lions. And I ran into Spiro Ditas from CBS Saturday at the Indiana-Michigan basketball contest at Assembly Hall. Place was rocking in the second half, man. If you've never been to Assembly for a basketball game, even a bad team like the Hoosiers, and they're bad this year. Mike Woodson's leaving, thank goodness. But, man, that place is awesome. But Spiro was on the call on CBS and saw him, and we're going to get him on the pod, too. Of course, does NFL games for CBS as well in Westwood One. We'll get Spiro on soon, too. All right, I mentioned this yesterday, though. I digress. Interior defensive linemen. We watched the Eagles crush the Chiefs. We saw what the defensive tackles for Philadelphia was doing to that Kansas City offensive line. And a lot of people are saying, well, what are the Lions going to do when it comes to their own D-line? Will they bring Levi Onwuzurike back? We know Aleem McNeil will be back, but probably not at the start of the year. Is DJ Reader going to be a cap casualty? Will he be cut to save the team over $7 million in cap space? Or does Reader, playing on last year's deal, elevate his game and play the part of a very serviceable plus defensive tackle? Josh Pascal is there. Kaminsky coming back from injury. Broderick Martin. We need to see something from Broderick Martin. What are the Lions going to do? So as far as the free agent rankings from my friends at PFF, when it comes to interior defensive linemen, there's not a lot of options. Not a lot of options. Is Brad Holmes going to spend $21 million a year for Big Osa from the Cowboys, who's really the best interior defensive lineman? I'm not so sure. Milton Williams from the Eagles would be awesome. 14th rated defensive lineman from PFF this year. But again, you're looking at something like 3 years and $63 million for Milton Williams, who's only 26 years old. He's a stud. Do the Eagles bring him back, or does he test the waters and go get big money? Brad Holmes has never spent that kind of money on a free agent. DJ Reader got $13 million coming off of injury last year, and that was expensive. Milton's going to cost you about $20 million a year. Onwuzurike, according to PFF, is the third best interior defensive lineman on the market, yet they only project him to get $8 million in free agency, a 2-year, $16.5 million deal. So about $8.25 million. If that's all it's going to cost, then maybe Levi comes back. BJ Hill from the Bengals is an option. Another kind of road grader type, 2 years, $20.5 million. He was a 25th rated defensive lineman this year from PFF and graded in the 70s. Calais Campbell, who's like 45,000 years old, would get maybe a $3 million deal if he wants to come back and play at age 38 next year. Jaron Reed, I've always liked, but he's kind of older, getting up there in age, 32 years old from the Seahawks. Another player that grades out well every year. Interior pass rusher, not maybe great against the run. 1 year, $6 million, was with Seattle last year. Poona Ford from the Chargers might only cost $3.5 million. Had a really good year from a PFF perspective and was 5th best in the league for our interior defensive lineman, and had a very big bounce back year. If you can get Poona Ford for 1 year and $3.5 million, please do that. Tershawn Wharton from the Chiefs didn't have a great game Sunday night. Tier Tart, also from the Chargers, also looking like a 1-year deal. Graded out well with PFF this year at 78. DJ Jones from the Broncos, probably about a $9 million a year player because he's only 30. One of the most disruptive run defenders in the NFL, but had a big missed tackle rate this year. And PFF grade dipped into the 60s this year for DJ Jones, who did not have a good year in 2023. So to sit here and go, oh man, there's a lot of great options out there. Maybe Holmes can get a Poona Ford on a good contract. Bring back Onwuzurike. Bring back Reader. Obviously, Aleem will be back. But those are the kind of options we're looking at in terms of players on the market. Ford would be good. I always like Jaron Reed. I know he's 32. But those are the kind of options that you're looking at when it comes to interior defensive linemen. There's not a Dexter Lawrence like there was last offseason that is out there that could just be a game changer type. But the Lions spent $13 million on DJ Reader this past offseason. All right, coming up next, Lorin Cox from Locked On Bears, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network on a Tuesday. Locked On Lions. And the program today brought to you by PrizePicks. Football season might be over, but basketball is in full swing. And there's no better way to stay in the game than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With PrizePicks, you just pick more or less on at least 2 player stat projections. And if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. All right. Maybe Jason Tatum this week. Is he going to score more than 29 points in one of the games that the Celtics are playing? Possibly. What about Cade Cunningham? More than or less than 25 points for tonight when the Pistons take on the Chicago Bulls. PrizePicks is quick and easy. You can set up your lineup in less than 60 seconds, and their fast and secure withdrawals mean you're going to get your winnings in as little as 15 minutes. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Always enjoy catching up with our buddy from Locked On Bears. Lorin Cox is with us. The Bears have turned into, of course, the Lions West. Ben Johnson, Antoine Randall, JT Barrett, let's just keep adding on, Lorin. But how are you, first of all? And thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been fun, like being the belle of the ball. Everyone's jealous that the Bears got Ben Johnson. Usually that's not the case for Chicago.
It's amazing. It's like the Bears got the first, got like you said, the belle of the ball and the guy that everybody wanted. And it just seems like, Lorin, that the minute Eberflus was fired, it almost seemed like some channeling was going on, and that Ben Johnson was going to be the guy no matter what. I know they interviewed everybody from like Mike McCarthy to Eddie George, but yet this seemed like a foregone conclusion pretty early on, don't you think?
And Ben Johnson's agent said as much. He said, like, the day after Thanksgiving when they fired Matt Eberflus, conversation started with Bears general manager Ryan Poles. Like that had been the guy they wanted from the very get-go, and the Bears had been, I think Rick Smith said, like, every single week there was contact between Poles and the agent, just checking in, kind of working through stuff, staying close and staying tab. So, like, yeah, the Bears interviewed, I think, 15 other head coaching candidates, but Ben Johnson never even made it into Hallis Hall. They did a virtual interview and said, yep, good enough. We'll get our other stuff done. You're eliminated. Let's get the deal done.
What's the last couple of weeks been like? Certainly on your show, and I've caught some of it, and I know everybody's thrilled, and certainly, you know, some of the additions have been interesting, but take me through how you think Ben Johnson has done so far. And he's kind of made the media rounds too. It seems like Bears PR has made sure of that.
Yeah, he definitely nailed the opening press conference in a way that was refreshing and saying all the right things and gets the fan base quickly on his side. I've been trying to keep a open perspective on that, and it feels like every time you hire a head coach, they usually say a lot of the right things. Like, unless it's Liam Cohen saying Duval wrong or Adam Gates' eyes going everywhere. Like, most of the time, every fan base thinks their coach has said all the right things. And of course, every assistant coach that he hires is a great hire. And this is a locked and loaded staff. Like, I think there's a lot to really like. I think there's some legitimate to it, but there's also some real questions there. Their offensive coordinator is 28 and only been an assistant for a couple of seasons in the NFL. Their quarterback's coach, JT Barrett from the Lions, like, he's only coached in the NFL for 2 or 3 seasons. There's some interesting mixes of youth there, some other guys who have experience but have never worked under Ben Johnson before or worked under Dan Campbell before. They're just from outside organizations that he's got to bring all those personalities together, Eric Bieniemy, for example, and make one cohesive, happy coaching staff that's all on the same page, all giving the same message. And that's one of the real head coach tests that he hasn't really had to do before.
It's interesting you just brought up Bieniemy. That was going to be my next question. You know, Ben Johnson comes from this culture in Detroit under Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes that is just, it's squeaky clean. It's flawless. Everybody got along. Everybody was on the same page. Bieniemy all of a sudden has become a job jumper and a guy that went from the hottest OC to never getting a sniff as a head coach. A lot of rumblings and reports. He's not a good person. How has that been received in Chicago? And how do you think he'll do with Ben Johnson?
Yeah, I think there's a hope, I will say. And I don't know there's been a lot reported on it, but there's a hope or a feeling that if he's just running backs coach, that he can focus on, and I think he's also technically, like, he might have a running game coordinator, some minor title added to that. But if he's just focused on one position, right, then maybe it's more manageable, that he has a lot of layers above him in terms of, oversight, and that he can be hard on the running backs or whatever, but Ben Johnson and other people are going to be also involved in that too, and that Bieniemy can just kind of focus on skill and technique, and that maybe they can kind of align in, they've both been described as perfectionists who demand a lot from their players, and maybe one goes about that in a better way, Ben Johnson, than the other, Eric Bieniemy, but at least there can be some kind of like mutual understanding of, like, we do want the same thing, and maybe we can work together on how to get there.
Talking to Lorin Cox, host of Locked On Bears, here on a Tuesday Locked On Lions. What are the expectations for Ben Johnson here this offseason? Are people all of a sudden saying, they're going to win 11 games, they're going to the playoffs? How has that changed now that he's gotten the head coaching job?
Yeah, I think there's an immediate expectation of drastically improved offense. Now what that means for wins and losses, I think, is going to depend on what Ryan Poles is able to do for him. Like, I think there's sort of the separation of, like, yes, Ben Johnson needs to make Caleb Williams play better and get the offense to produce more, but Ben Johnson's also going to need Ryan Poles and the team to invest in his offensive line more. I think there's this feeling like Ben Johnson's expectations are tied to how much confidence we will have in the offensive line that they build for him this offseason, and that if there's significant offensive line questions again, then I think that's going to lower Ben Johnson's expectations, because we'll go in saying, well, yeah, it needs to be better, but we still don't know if the left tackle is any good, or we still don't know if this right guard is any good, or however it ends up panning out. But if they give him, a couple big free agent signings and a couple early draft picks on the offensive line, then it's like, this better be a top 10 offense. And we better be talking about, pushing double-digit wins and playoff conversation here is, I think, where the expectations start right away.
You mentioned Randall L before, obviously kind of a loaded group of receivers. And I think this year probably did not do what everybody expected them to do. How do you kind of assess that position, and how do you think Antoine Randall L will do?
Yeah, I think it's a great situation for Antoine Randall L to come into. You got DJ Moore and Rome Odunze. Keenan Allen is a free agent, entering free agency. And I think at this point, he's not expected to come back, but it's not off the table. It just seems more likely than not. He's kind of been coy about what his plans are going to be for the future. But that group definitely underachieved this season, and it felt like the coaching they were getting wasn't necessarily helping. There's been a lot of different reports out about how little Shane Waldron was helping Caleb Williams, for example, in terms of watching film and like going through footwork and stuff, and that a lot of it was Caleb kind of on his own trying to build these rapport with these receivers. And rookie quarterback, it's a little bit tough to do with all these guys out there and all these different weapons to work on. So I think there's a feeling like you can get more out of DJ Moore, and Rome Odunze can take that step in year 2, and you can feel like, man, this is a pretty good receiving core. And I'll also say there's a feeling like Ben Johnson didn't need 3 elite receivers in Detroit. Like, you can kind of get by with, obviously Amon-Ra St. Brown was very, very good. And then you added Jameson Williams, and like, there's sort of this feeling like, okay, then DJ Moore and Rome Odunze should be enough. And you can just find your Tim Patrick to be a number 3. No shade to Tim Patrick, but you don't need 3,000-yard guys. You just need 2 really good guys and then some other like good role players.
By the way, Tim Patrick is a free agent. I kind of putting the I'm expecting, I think you could agree with me, Lorin, there are going to be some Lion free agents that end up in Chicago and probably end up in New York with Aaron Glenn, right?
Yeah, I think Kevin Zeitler is a big one too. That's a lot of Bears fans have circled. The Bears need offensive line help, and they got to fill all 3 interior spots. So if you could get a good deal on an older veteran there, and then maybe draft a rookie to kind of develop behind him, grab him, grab Tim Patrick. I don't think we'll see a Allen Robinson reunion, but there's a veteran coach in the quarterback room. There's a lot of options there.
If you're Zeitler, though, why would you go? No offense to Chicago, and obviously you can win quickly and turn things around quickly in this league, but to me, I think the Lions have to bring him back. It might be an issue of years and money, but if you're the Lions, if you make a decent offer, Lions are still ahead of the Bears. I don't know why at 35, 36 he would go to Chicago, though.
Well, the Bears got 40-year-old Mercedes Lewis to come back and play for them, so there's something about it the players want to come play for.
No, that's definitely true. We're talking to Lorin Cox with us, Locked On Bears. Anything that Ben Johnson has said over the last couple of weeks that caught your attention in terms of the direction of this offense and how things are going to be different this time around? Then you and I have talked many times just about the revolving door since Lovie Smith that has not worked out.
Yeah, I think the big thing that has Bears fans excited was he talked about how when he first got to Detroit, right, he sat down with Jared Goff and said, like, how are we going to make this offense for you? What's going to work well for you? And we'll build it from there. And he kind of said, I'm going to do the same thing with Caleb Williams. I am tearing down my Detroit Lions offense. The offense you saw in Detroit is not going to be the offense we're going to run in Chicago. I'm going to sit down with Caleb Williams. We'll break it down to its studs, figure out what works well for him, and then kind of build it up from there. And I think there's this feeling of like, finally, you don't have quarterback and head coach who technically aren't, Ben Johnson didn't draft Caleb Williams here. They're not technically on the same, cycle here, but they're working together, not trying to fit quarterback into offensive system or fit offensive system, around quarterback. It's about making like one cohesive plan for the two of them. And I think that comes with a nice sort of refreshing idea. But to me, it also comes with like okay, so there was a winning formula in Detroit and now we are doing something different. So is that guaranteeing that it's going to work just as well in Chicago? If you're not trying to just take the same thing and apply it here, then the results could end up being a little bit different as well.
What do you think the biggest thing? I mean, obviously the offensive line. I mean, Caleb was on his back a lot this year, but what's the biggest thing that Ben Johnson has to kind of, ingratiate into Caleb Williams? You think
it's got to be like more offensive structure, right? Like I think you have to walk this tight line between you don't want to restrict Caleb Williams too much and turn him into a pocket passer. You don't want to make him Jared Goff in that regard. No, it's not to insult Jared Goff, but just that's not the style of quarterback Caleb Williams is. But at the same time, like you got to give him a foundation to work off of so that then when he needs to go be the playmaker, he can go do the playmaking stuff. But like there just wasn't enough structure around him from a play calling standpoint last year where, again, footwork was not always tied to routes and play calls. Shane Waldron said, like, if you need to do 3 steps on this play, do 3 steps. If you need to do 5, go for it. If you need to do 7, go for it. It was kind of on Caleb to figure out how many steps he needed to take on a play. But I think for Ben, he could say, hey, we're doing three steps in a slant route here. And then if that's not there, then Caleb can go break from that and be the playmaker. But you have to give him that initial first structure to work off of and sort of get into a rhythm and build up that way. And then he can be great after that. And I think just sort of giving that to Caleb where you're putting training wheels on, but you're not wrapping them in bubble wrap, feels like the nice mix there.
More with Lorin Cox coming up next. Could it be between Detroit, Chicago, and the Peter Bukowski-led Green Bay Packers to get Myles Garrett? We're going to talk about that with the Lorin Cox coming up next. And Locked On Lions for this Tuesday, brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. NBA action back at FanDuel is just getting started, of course. We're getting actually ready for the All-Star break and everything else in a couple of weeks. No better place to get in on this NBA action than at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. Interesting, I got Lorin on today because the Pistons are playing the Bulls in back-to-back games Tuesday, tonight, and tomorrow night at the United Center, the house that Chuck Swirsky built. So check out all the action on FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. I didn't really just say the house that Chuck Swirsky built, did I, Lord?
Great reference. Good dude.
Look, I'm a big Adam Amin fan, so let's go there. And Stacey King, they do a great job on Bulls TV. The poor Bulls, right, Lorin? I mean, it's like, geez.
All of Chicago sports right now. I mean, White Sox, Cubs, Bears. I mean, at least Bears are turning around a little bit here, but yeah, at least we have good broadcasters. We'll take that.
Right. The Blackhawks are bad too. I just noticed that they're all bad. Although the Cubs and Tigers are kind of jockeying for position to get Alex Bregman, so we'll see about that. But Lorin Cox is with us, Locked On Bears. This Myles Garrett situation, do you think, and I heard yesterday Green Bay, obviously the Lions are kind of been linked to him and could use them opposite of Hutchinson. The fact of the matter is Brad Holmes doesn't love trading draft capital. We'll see if that's a situation that could happen. But do you think Ryan Poles makes a play for Garrett?
I think Ryan Poles is going to explore that, but I think he's going to come in fairly timid on that. I don't think the Bears are at this stage right now where it's like, go make the splash addition for Myles Garrett. I think they look at this and say, we've got 3 holes to fill in the offensive line, plus you do need to add a pass rusher, plus some contract extensions to hand out elsewhere, plus a few other depth spots you need to fill. And all of a sudden, like, it feels like the Bears are still like a year away from that big Myles Garrett type of move, right? Like, you need a pass rusher, but you need, like, if you're giving up draft picks and cap space, that makes it harder to give Ben Johnson everything he needs on the offensive side of the ball. Like, the Bears are not elite pass rusher away from contention. They're a lot more than that. And like, yes, if you get Myles Garrett for a first round pick or something, like if it was cheap or whatever, like, sure. But I don't think this Bears team is in a position where they want to give up multiple picks. Like, they need to lay that foundation with, like, hit on 3 or 4 draft picks this season that are all like cornerstone type players for your franchise. Just look at the Philadelphia Eagles, right? Like, that defensive line full of draft picks that are all cheap. Like, the Bears need to get closer to that. And then if you got the room the next year, that's when you make the big all-in trade to go, all right, we're getting the next Khalil Mack move for the Bears, right? They're just not at that stage of the process right now.
You took your right tackle this past year. You keep mentioning the O-line. Obviously, right tackle's there, but what else has to happen for Ben Johnson to try to turn that Bears O-line into what he had in Detroit?
Yeah, right now, the Bears offensive line has 4 players from this season under contract next season. Left tackle, right tackle, backup guard. So they need, if they don't re-sign these players, they need 3 new starters on the interior, left guard, center, right guard, and they're not really expected to bring any of them back. Tevin Jenkins probably going to end up walking in free agency, just too significant of an injury history there to give him the type of money he's going to be looking for. So that means some combination of draft picks and free agency is three new starters, center, left guard, right guard. And personally, to me, like, I would love to go sign 3 veterans and then draft 3 players at all 3 positions. Like, just load up, get the 34-year-old Kevin Zeitler or Zach Martin or, Brandon Scherfer, whoever, as a short-term piece there, draft a guy behind him and develop it. Just like, you can't have too many good offensive linemen. Certainly Detroit has shown us that along the way, how much they continue to invest in that position. And just when you think you've got enough guys, take another one in the 3rd round, because you never know when Zeitler's going to walk as a free agent and you need to replace a starter there.
Is there an assistant coach on the staff? We referenced Randall L and JT coming over from Detroit, but anybody that fans were really excited about, or anybody that people were questioning? I'm sure Bieniemy was a little bit of a question mark for some.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious one we haven't talked about is defensive coordinator Dennis Allen, and I don't know if you want to get more into that, but like the feeling was something Ryan Poles talked about early in this process was if you have a first-time head coach like Ben Johnson, getting someone or multiple people on staff who have head coaching experience just to identify blind spots and to be able to say like, hey, Ben, you've never been through this before, but I went through this when I was a head coach, even though obviously Dennis Allen as a head coach wasn't particularly great at the head coaching role. At least he's been through it before.
He's a good DC. Yeah.
As a coach and defensive coordinator, we're still consistently top 10 defenses in the NFL. So there's a lot of confidence in the type of experience and that sort of like right-hand man that he can lean on, and also not be somebody who you're worried about getting hired away and becoming a head coach in a couple of seasons because he's been a head coach twice. And maybe he can kind of just Steve Spagnuolo and Vic Fangio the rest of his career. Not that he's that good, but that he's just going to be a defensive coordinator. And then you can have that long-term continuity of Johnson's running the offense, Allen's running the defense, and it's the same message for hopefully, 3, 4, 5+ years.
It's kind of ironic. The Lions did that with Dan Campbell. Dan had some obviously interim head coaching experience, but they put Anthony Lynn with him as the OC, and that lasted like 8 weeks. And Campbell demoted him and then fired him after 1 year because Anthony, of course, had coached the Chargers. It was kind of ironic. All right, how do you look at next year? Obviously, we got to go through free agency, the draft, but what is the realistic wins and losses expectations? It's way early to do this, but are fans thinking, all right, we've got to be in the playoffs next year with Ben Johnson, or does he get a year to kind of observe a little bit?
Yeah, I don't know if it's we got to be in the playoffs, but like we got to be in the mix for the playoffs. We have to be in the hunt, right? We can't be eliminated by week 12. Like even if it ends up being a 9-8 team because you lose week 18 and or whatever it is that you end up a game short or whatever it is. Like I don't think it's playoffs or we're pissed, get the pitchforks or torches and fire this bum. I think there's an understanding that like you can't just fix everything all right away. But at the same time, I think that hype train is going to build up more and more. I mean, it built up last season with Matt Eberflus, and Bears fans were already talking about going to be a top 5 defense and make the playoffs, and Caleb's going to do all this stuff. So like if Eberflus could inspire that kind of off the rails optimism with Shane Waldron and company, I have a feeling that the Bears will get some offensive linemen. They might add another receiver and add a couple of defensive pieces. And then by after the draft, Bears fans are going to look at this roster and go, oh man, this team is going to be a surprise team to win the NFC North and unseat the Lions. And like, we got to slow down here. And I think we're not there yet, but I anticipate the hype's going to get a little bit out of control. So I'm trying to get on the front end and say, yeah, like 9-10 wins feels like something that we can all be happy with.
All right, Lorin, great to catch up. Thanks for the Ben Johnson update, and we'll talk again soon.
Hey, likewise. Thanks for having me.
Lorin Cox with us from a Locked On Bears on a Tuesday, a Locked On Lions.